Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Ches in Zbachim. It's Lim Prachinical based on Sun Batzar Shipi. Yesterday we talked about carbon Pesach. Remember, there's two carbonos that if you bring them Shalom Lishma, they're totally puzzle. They're not. It's not just that you're not Yotzei. It's even B'diavad. It's puzzle. One is Pesach. One is Chatas. That's what the first Mishnah said in the parak. Then we discussed yesterday. How do we know that? All other karbonos we saw. How do you know that they have lishma? We learned that from Shlam, all those cases. So we said those all have to be lishma, but lechatchila b'diavad, they're kosher, except the balam is not yotzei. But by Pesach and Chatos, you're not yotzei even b'diavad. Meaning, if you did it, it's puzzle. It's not that you're not even yotzei. You're not yotzei by any of them, but the carbon is puzzle. By the other ones, by Ola and Shlamim and Osham, etc. So if you bring it Shalom Lishma, it's kosher, except you're not Yotzei. By Pesach and Chatas, it's totally puzzle. How do we know? So the Gemara looked for places for Psachim, and then it said, well, wait a minute. As far as Lechatchila, that goes from the same pasuk as Shlamim. They're all the same. All they're included because the pasuk right after Zos HaTorah refers to Karbaneim, which refers to Pesach and Maser and Bechor also. So Lechatchila, we know everything from those psukim. The other psukim that you brought down from Shamar, Chodesh Aviv, etc., the psukim we're talking about Pesach, those are to tell you that even b'di'evet, like Shana Levakasav La'akav, like the pasuk repeated it to tell you that even b'di'evet it's no good. Now what about by Chatos? By Chatos you could say the same thing. As far as Chatos goes, Lichatchila, from Shlamim, from Zosator Lola Mincha. You only need psukim b'di'evet, but the Gemara doesn't assume that at the beginning. The Gemara at the Havman assumes that, well, we have psukim by Chatos itself to tell me both Lichatchila and b'di'evet. So that's where we're starting with now, from the bottom of Zion and Beis, the last two lines. Chatas Mana, how do we know that Chatas is no good even b'di'evet, that it's puzzle if you did it Shalom Lishma? Pasuk after Shachat Osa Chatas, it's got to be Chatas, Shetei Shchita L'Shem, Chatas got to be L'Shem Chatas, not for any other carbon. Ashkan Shchita, that's far as Shchita goes. It says V'Shachat, okay. Kalava, and how do we know that when you receive the dam, the second procedure? Remember the Shchita Kabbalah Lachas Rika, Kabbalah Minal, how we know? The Sivit says V'Lakach HaKoin Midam HaChatas. Lakach Rashi says is a lotion of Kabbalah. Okay, should take Kabbalah Shem Chatas. Fine. So we got those two. Ashkan Shchita v'Kabbalah. So we know Shchita and Kabbalah have to be Lishma, Lechatchila. Zrika, how do we know that the Zrika has to be Lishma also? It's going to be the same Chatas. Number Kabbalah says V'chipol avakoin mechataso. Kapara is always with the dam. That's the Zrika. When do you get the Kapara? Only with the Zrika Sadam. Halacha Rashi says you don't need because Halacha is included in Kabbalah. Fine. That's all Lechatchila. So we have Sukkim tell me that Shchita, Kabbalah, Halacha, and Zrika have to be Lishma. Should take Kabbalah Shem Chatas. Fine. Ashkan Shini Kodesh. That's if you had a Kabbana for a different carbon. Shechta Chatas, let's say L'Shem Osha. Shinu Balam, and how do I know if I had a Kabbana that it should be for, instead of Reuben, it should be for Shimon, so the Zrika should be for Shimon. How do we know that that's also no good? Amakra, Olav, it says V'chiper Olav, Alo Chavero. Okay, so now we have Ashkan Lemitzvah, that's fine, Lemitzvah Lechatchila. La'akaman, how do I know that if you did this Zrika for Shimon instead of Ruvain, even b'diavad, it's no good, it's possible. So it's Karamar for the Rav Shapiro, like Rav Shapiro is going to explain in a minute from a different pasuk. Chatas chataso. Pasuk says it's chataso. Why do you say the extra vav there? Achnami chatas chataso. We got the extra vav to teach me that even b'diavad, if you did this rika for l'shem bal the shina balam, it's possible. So Ashken. So now we got mitzvah b'shina kodesh. So we got mitzvah b'shina kodesh. This rika, right? Ashken mitzvah b'shina kodesh. L'chatchila for all of them, right? V'zrika b'shinei balam bein l'mitzvah bein l'akav, and zrika b'shinei balam we have for the mitzvah l'akav because we have chataso teaching me what v'chiper has to be the zrika has to be l'shma l'chatchila, and chataso is to teach me b'di'eved. What about l'akav b'chol avodas b'shinei kodesh? What about l'akav? So we have all the avodas shchita kabbalah zrika l'chatchila b'shinei kodesh or no l'chatchila have to be l'shma. How do we know even b'di'eved that it's ma'akav? Meaning that if you did it shalom l'shma, it's possible by Shina Kodesh, all four of them, because we had no pasuk for no second pasuk, only one pasuk. Again, we're assuming we're learning everything out from Chatas. At the end, we're going to come out, well, the basic idea that it has to be L'Shma L'Chatchila, that's from Shlamim, from Zos HaTorah Lola Mincha. And then these psukim will tell me for even La'akiv. But right now, we don't know that. Uvashara Bodos, B'Shina Ba'alam, Bein L'Mitzvah, Bein L'Akmanam. Okay, we have, by Shina Ba'alam, we had for Zrika, L'Mitzvah, and La'akiv. Again, L'Chatchila and B'di'evet. How do we know the other avodas? That if you did Shchita Kabbalah with a Kavanah, you're going to be Zorik the Dam for Shimon instead of Reuben. How do we know that's so good? Rav Yona, Osim Echatas Nazir. Oh, okay, you know what? Regular chatas is what we call a chatas chaylev. You know, that if you ate chaylev on purpose, you're chayiv kares. And if you ate it b'shogeg, you bring a chatas, regular chatas, a kisbar sira. How do we know? Because, well, we'll learn out. How do I know the ikuf that even b'di'evet is so good? Chatas nazir. The chsiv, it says v'ikar v'kon lefnei Hashem. But it says chataso. This is where it says that extra vav. That's olaso. It says as chataso so sheikos yos l'shem chatas. That teaches you that everything shita kabbalah l'shem chatas. That's shekodesh. So we're assuming now that we'll learn out chatas from chatas of a nazir. So Ashkan Shini Kodesh, that's Shini Kodesh, Shini Balam and Nolan. How do I know Shini Balam? Skips the parentheses. Amar Afun, but this is where Rav Shapiro said it. Chatas chataso. Oh, we have Shini Balam. Right? How do we know? Right? How do we know Ashkan Kodesh, Shini Balam? How do we know it applies to Lin? Chataso. The extra vav teaches me what? Remember, the kasha was we have only Shar Vodas b'Shini Balam, Bein Lemitzvim Lakim and Nolan. So learn out the Shar Vodas from the extra vav there. Number one, Elamiata Olaso my darshbe. It says there by Chatas Nazar, it says Vasas Chataso Vesalaso. Number one, if you're darshaning the extra vav of Chataso, what are you going to do with the extra vav of Olaso? So the Gemara then says on Ravina, you ask Kashbar Laso, Ravina Minchas Minchaso Nesach Nischo my darshbe. What do you get darshan there? You could ask that kasha. It says by Nazir. It says what? It says Mincha. It says Mincha so instead of minchas, and it says nischo instead of minchas. What do you get dashing above there? So why don't you ask that kasha too? Why are you only asking on ola and ola so? Hahumi boile no the mincha so in this case to teach me mincha some of the scam balayla mincha some of the scam afilu mocher. That even if you the mincha you shchita kabbalah has to be only during the day. It can't be after shkia. The mincha and the nesachim that accompany the carbon that could be even by night or even the next day. That's what the extra vav of minchaso and nischo teach me there that they could even be at night or the next day. Ela olaso my dashas. What are you dashing there? That's one kasha. If you're dashing chataso to teach me leikuv by shini balam, that if you had a kavan of shini balam by any of the avodas by zrika, we learned from the basic pasuk. But if by shchita kabbalah and olach, if you had a kavan, you can resort to dam for Shimon instead of Ruvain. That it's puzzle. Where do you know that from? You know it from chatas. What are you going to do with olaso? My dash pepesu. How could you learn how to regular chatas from chatas nazir? They're different. Chatas chayla michatas nazir logamskin shekain yeshima da macherim. Chatas nazir has a different chumrah. That besides the chatas, you also bring nazir brings an own shlam when he purifies himself. Right? Chatas nazir mechatas leif you cannot also logam you can shekain kares. Chatas chayla, the standard chatas is for a sin like eating chayla or eating dam. The maze that your chayiv car is for, so that it has a stringency there. So you can't learn out chatas chaylev from chatas nazir or chatas nazir from chatas chaylev. Ela marava, so Rava says, okay, so how do you know? Again, we didn't come back to the idea that we're going to come out at the end, like we came out at the end yesterday of Psachim, that it's by Pesach that Zos HaTorah teaches you the basic idea, and then these psukim can be used for ikuv, for that it's indispensable, you must do it all as is possible. Ela Marava, Asi Mechatas Mitzorah. Let's learn out Chatas Chaylev from Chatas Mitzorah. Mitzorah, also when he purifies himself, he has to bring a Chatas. Vasakoin Esa Chatas, he has to do it. Sheikos, he also Shem Chatas. Oh, everything has to be Shem Chatas. So now we're assuming, right, that the basic idea of what? How do you know Lechatchila, that a Chatas is to be Lishma, V'shachar Asal Lishma, V'lakacha Kohen, etc., V'chiper Alav. That's the idea that has to be lishma. How do I know that it has to be lishma even b'di'evet? Even if you did it b'di'evet, it's no good. It's possible if you didn't have lishma, because it says by chatas masor v'asakoin chatas shikol. Everything has to be l'shem chatas. Ashkan sheni, that's sheni kodesh. If you didn't do it l'shem chatas, you bought it for another carbon. That's sheni kodesh. Sheni balim. How do I know sheni balim? Amarkov v'chiper ala mitaher, and it'll atone for the mitaher. What does mitaher mean, Michael? It means the one who's getting atoned, right? The one who's getting toned. Only in this one, not the other one. So again, you're learning it all from Mitzorah. Bakati. Wait. So that seems good. You can learn out the ikuv from Mitzorah. Bakati. How can you learn out chatas chaylev from Mitzorah? Chatas chaylev mechatas Mitzorah lo yafi. You can't learn out why. Shekain yeshma damachem. Again, Mitzorah brings the birds, and he brings the other karbanos also. He brings the ola chatas, brings the other karbanos also. Chatas Mitzorah mechatas chaylev. You can't learn gomra. Shekain karas. By Mitzorah doesn't get chorus for having the leprosy. He doesn't get chorus for that. So you can't learn out Metzora from Chaylev. You can't learn out Chaylev from Metzora. So the Gemara says, okay, Mechad lo asi. You can't learn it out from one. In other words, one from another. We said you can't learn out Chaylev from Nazir. You can't learn out Nazir from Chaylev. You can't learn out Chaylev from Metzora. You can't learn Metzora from Chaylev. So you can't learn out one from one. Maybe you can learn one from two. Where do you want it not to be written, and you'll be able to learn out the other two? You learn it from the other two. So don't say bechatas chaylev. Don't say this ikuv, and you learn out the ikuv from the other two. Both of the other ones have other karbanos with them. Both the mitzora and the nose bring other karbanos, whereas the chatas chaylev is only that one animal. Don't say bechatas nose but takes from the other one. The other ones you can't get a reprieve. In other words, you can't have your an annulled. If you did a sin, you can't have an annulled. You have to bring a carbon chatos, right? A mitzora has to bring his carbonos. You can't say can't be sure. A nazir can go to the rabbi and say it's a neder. Nazir is a kind of neder. I regret what I did, and you'll find a petach for him, and you can be showing that. So you can't learn out nazir from the other ones because they have a chumrah that you can't ask shayla, whereas a nazir you can. So learn out. Don't say by chatz mitzora. Learn out mitzora from the other two, and therefore what? If you learn out from the other two, therefore we have the extras. Effectively, the pasuk of chatz mitzora is extra to teach me ikuv. Learn out mitzora from the other two. The other ones, there's no, for a regular carbon chatas chaylev, you can't say if I'm poor, you bring birds or bring a carbon mincha. That's not the case. The same thing with what? With a nazir. But whereas by a mitzora, you can't learn a mitzora from them. Why? Because they have a chumrah that you can't bring a cheaper carbon. There's no discount for you. You got to bring the regular carbon. Whereas by mitzora, if you're poor, you could bring a core carbon. So you can't learn out one from one. You can learn out from two. Ella, how do we know that these are ikuv? Ella Makra, let's go back. Everything is mukish shlam. Mashlam ben shin kodesh ben shin balam being lishma mitzvah. Just like by shlamim, lechatchila you have to have lishma both for shin kodesh and shin balam. Avchatos ben shin kodesh ben shin balam being lishma mitzvah. The mitzvah means lechatchila, right? But if you didn't do it right, is it still good? Is it kosher? No. Hilkach mitzvah mishlamim. The Hanach Kroy and the psukim that we brought down that meant for the mitzvah, those are la'akiv. That's how we know. So now we have Pesach and Chatos. If you bid it Shalol Lishma, it's puzzle. Not that it's kosher, but you're not Yotze, you got to bring another one. It's puzzle. Why? Because the basic idea from Shlomim and the psukim that we have by Pesach yesterday and by Chatos today, or Le'ikuf to tell me that even b'diavad, it's puzzle. Ashan Chatos Chaylev. Okay, so fine. So what are we saying? That the pasuk here, we start out with the pasuk with Shachar Osal Lachatos. What does Lachatos tell me? That even b'diavad, if you did it Shalol Lishma, it's no good. Lachatchila we know from Shlomim. B'diavad Shachar Lachatos. Dafka lachatas, nothing else. That's fine by a regular chatas chaylev. Chatas davoros kachavim. What about chodas of avodah zara, where it doesn't say lachatas over there, and also chatas davodah zara and udishmias kol ubitus asimim tutzvik shkash. Remember in where's in Vayikra Hey where it talks about the karbanos that are olav yored. Remember if you swore falsely that you didn't know testimony. Or you made a shvua that you're going to eat tuna, you're not going to eat tuna, and you ate tuna. Or you went into the basement in a state of tumah, or a kach from a state of tumah, b'shogeg. There, where you bring carbon over the loksibu, there it also doesn't say lachatos. Minon, how do you know that those things b'diev it also for shalot? If you brought it shalot lishma, that it's no good, it's possible. Because chatos of is called masim chatos chaylev. So that you can chaylev. Why shekin karas? Kamosa, they're both karas, so you could learn out from matzad. V'hanach kulu asi b'matzad. And the other ones, you'll also learn from what do you mean matzad? From all three. Now remember, we said you need all three. You need chatos chaylev, chatos mitzora, chatos nazir. You can't learn out one from the other two. But if you have all three, then you could learn out these other ones of learn from there. Rashi on the left side, right? Mechatos chaylev, chatos mitzora. Rashi asim matzad. I'm reading Rashi about even where we are. Asim matzad, Rashi Maskal asim mitzad, mechatos chaylev, chatos nazir mitzora. The chipach is when you can ask malachatos chaylev shekein kares, chatos nazir mitzora yochichu that I don't have kares. Malachatos nazir mitzora shekein yesh mem dam machem that have other karbanos, chatos chaylev which doesn't have another karban. Atzara shavashen what that they're all that if you brought it shalol lishma you're not yotzei. That it's possible. Not only you're not yotzei, it's possible. Afani avi chatos tishmi eskol v'chetzchol. Right. You can't learn out from the other two. Rashi goes on to explain, because when you ask only from two, you could always ask a kasha on that. etc., etc. So you need all three. Once you have all three, then you could learn out the other ones from there. You could say avodas kachavim could also learn from all three, but you don't need all three. You can just learn out directly from chatzchel, like he just said. Now that we've understood that Pesach and Chatas, if you brought a Shalosh Shema, it's puzzle entirely. So the Gemara goes on to explain what's the rules about Pesach. Tan Rabbanan, Pesach Bismano, what's the Zman for Pesach? The 14th day of Nisan in the afternoon. If you bring it any other day, what's the halacha there? It's puzzled. If you bring it Lishma, if you bring it Shalol Lishma, different. What is he? Tan Rabbanan, Pesach Bismano Lishmo, Kasher Shalol Lishmo is puzzle. Ubeshayamos Hashalo Lishmo is puzzle. If you bring a Korban Pesach on the 15th or on the 13th of Nisan or any other day of the year, and it's a machlokas, what about on the 14th in the morning? Because it's got to be Bein Arbayim afternoon. It's got to be in the afternoon, the Korban Pesach. If you bring it in the morning, is the morning like the 15th or the 13th, or is it like the 14th? That's a machlokas we'll see later on. But in any case, understand this. A Pesach of Isman on the 14th in the afternoon, Lishmo, Kasher, Shloshmo is puzzle, like we've already explained. It's puzzle, like the first Mishnah said, like we explained yesterday. Uveshayamos Hashana, other days of the year, if you brought it Lishmo, it's puzzle. Shalol Lishmo, it's kosher. If I bring a Pesach, L'Shem Chatos, L'Shem Shlamim, L'Shem Ola on any other day of the year, it's kosher. Woo! What do you mean it's kosher? It's a Shlam, you can eat it, etc. You continue bringing, you can eat it. We don't even where to get this from. Amar Abu Shmuel, Shmuel's father said as follows. Amar, the pasuk says, Im menatzon karbano. What is a Pesach brought from? A Pesach is brought a male lamb or kid, goat. Right? What does that mean? Davar abominat something which comes only from tzom. Shlomim could be brought from bakar, and ola can be brought from bakar, right? But something that comes only from tzom, which is a pesach, can be a zevach shlomim. When if you bring it shalol lishmo any other time of the year, which means, and you understand. If I bring I have a Korban Pesach, I had an extra one, or my original one ran away, or whatever. I didn't bring it on Erev Pesach for whatever reason. Somebody got sick, whatever's emergency, you didn't bring it on Erev Pesach. Now it's a month later, not Pesach Sheni. It's just any other day of the year, and I bring it Shalol Lishma. I bring it L'Shem Chatas, Asham, Shlamim, anything, whatever you bring it for, it becomes a Shlamim. It becomes a Shlamim. Strange thing, right? But it's based on a pasuk. Im menatzon kabano lezevach shlom shem davar abba menatzon something which comes on which is a pesach lezevach shlomim so maybe what? Maybe it's only if you had a kavanah I'm going to bring it for shlom, then it becomes a shlom. How does it make sense to say? There's a logical to say if I bring a Korban Pesach, this was assigned, I set it up as a Korban Pesach, and now 2 months later I bring it l'shem chatos, it should become a shlomim. Maybe if I had kavanah for a shlamim, okay, maybe then I understand. But if I bring l'shem chatz to be a shlamim, yes, aim a shlamim midi achrina lo. Amrav Elam Rabbi Yochanan, no. Lezevach l'rabbos kol zevach. It says lezevach shlamim to teach me if I brought it for any other zevach, it should be given shlamim. So aim call the shachal lavi kamosa. Okay, fine. If I had a kavanah for any other carbon, I understand that it's still kosher, but maybe it should become that carbon. If I had kavanah for chatas, it should become a chatas. Become for ola, should be an ola. Why do you say if I had kavanah for any other carbon, it becomes a shlamim? Yeah, because if we would say could be a shlamim or any other zevach, fine, could come in. Zevach shlamim, it means l'kol the shachalei, whatever I shechted for, whatever zevach I shechted for, shlamim avishviyah shlamim. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe we should learn the zevach shlamim a different way. Ema l'zevach, maybe it's a klal uprat. Emel zevach is a klal, any carbon. Shlam is a particular carbon. Klal prat, emel chal mashu b'prat. Shlam me'min nechlo. But again, maybe it means only if I had kavanah for shlamim, then it's a shlamim. But if I had kavanah for anything else, maybe not. It says lo, Lashem har b'chol. But it says afterwards, zevach shlam Lashem. That includes everything. Maskel Rav Yaakov and so he always asks this kasha. Maskel Rav Yaakov, we had it the other day. Why do you say it's a klal parakal? The second klal is much more inclusive than the first klal. The first klal means it's a generalization. Then you have a prat, a particular detail. Then you have another generalization. But the second generalization, it's much bigger than the first. The first klal, mar zbachim, the sulo says zevach. That means any kind of a slaughter, any kind of a slaughtered animal, right? The sulo. Kol bas. The second one is lashem. Any korban lashem. Any korban lashem could be birds. It could include mincha, right? Lashem. Kol lashem afilu ofos afilu mincha. You see here that when he talks about a zevach, you mean normally a slaughtered 4-legged animal, not a 2-legged animal, because he says maybe a zevach only includes four-legged animals. Hashem includes even birds and menachos, so it's not the same. The answer is a ton of Shmuel, but Kol Prati Darish Gai Gav. When it comes to Kol Prat, they don't have to. The two translations don't have to be exactly the same. Kol Prat Kol Yeto Daniel Kevat. Ma Prat Mefurish. What's the characterization? How do you characterize this prat, this detail? Shu Shalol Lishmo. You brought it Shalol Lishmo. Shlomim, right? V'kosher, and it's kosher. B'diavad, right? It's kosher b'diavad. Av kosher Shalol Lishmo v'kosher. So it could be anything with Lishmo, even a chatos or an osha. Say ma'aprat before davar above and adar davar. Wait a minute. But if you want to say that you're including a klal prat includes anything like the prat, not the klal prat is only the prat, nothing else. Klal prat includes anything like the prat. So it's like the prat, anything which is like the prat. It's lo lishmo and it's kosher. But wait a minute, the prat is a shlom. A shlom is brought by a free will offering. You could do it on your own. Maybe it only includes things which are brought in, meaning if I had a kavanah, let's say for a toda or a shlamim or an ola, maybe that. Ola shlam ain, because you can bring it on your own. Chatos ashim lo. You can't just decide one day I'm going to bring a chatos and ashim. Remember, there was a Tana who says every day we sin, I can bring a chatos every day. I don't know what I sin something, but we don't hold like that. You don't stop. You can't just wake up one day and say I'd like to offer a chatos or an ashim. It's only if you actually sin. So maybe it doesn't include a chatos or ashim again. So maybe it means this: if I shechted a carbon pesach any other day of the year, shalol lishma. So if the Shalol Lishma was an Ola or a Shlamim or a bird or something, maybe. But if I had Kavan V'chatza Ashim, that would be included. Ella, you don't learn it from Klal Prat. Ella lezevach ribuya. Don't say that it's a Klal Prat or Klal, but rather the word zevach just is including all kinds of slaughtered animals. Ribuyu. Rashi says, take a look at Rashi, the last Rashi on the page, 7-8 lines from the bottom of Rashi at the end. Ein lashon klal. It's not a lashon klal. V'lo darshan b'klal. Uprat she'en klal zapatas bon b'ribu lashon. When you learn klal, it's not from the extra word. I have an extra word over here. It's rather from the mashmos. El mashmos across. It's mashgon. Anything that you want. I mean, any animal. Then it says bakar with some. That's a prat. In other words, klal prat is a mashmos. What does it sound like? A cloud. This includes everyone. All animals. Okay, a prat bakar is a prat. So when you learn klal prat, it's based on what does the word sound like? What is the meaning of the word? The mashmos, the meaning of the word, as opposed to when there's just an extra word. An extra word is a different kind of a limud. Ella says the Gemara in the second line from the bottom page. In the Gemara, Ella zevach ribuyahu. It's coming to include all animals. If I had a kavana that I have a carbon pesach here, kosher carbon pesach, and I brought it in the middle of the summer with a kavana of any other carbon, it becomes a shlamim. That's the rule. Lezevach, it becomes a shlamim. Ema. So again, now that we're learning it differently, not a klal prat, and now we're not saying it from l'shlamim v'zevach, including shlamim and all those zevachs, but rather that the word zevach is an extra word. It's a rebuy to include everything. So maybe, again, back to the question we had before. Maybe if I shech it for a chatas, it becomes a chatas. If I shecht it for an ola, it becomes an ola. Why do you say if I shecht it for anything, it becomes a shlamim? Rav Avin, the answer is it doesn't make sense. Why? Because what is a carbon pesach? A carbon pesach is something that's eaten. Not only is it eaten, you're mechuyev to eat it, right? So a carbon a carbon pesach, which we are now pushing aside, we are transferring it from being a carbon pesach. We're transferring it to be another carbon. We'd rather transfer from being a carbon which is eaten, which is pesach, to another carbon which is eaten, which is a shlamim. So we're not going to make it become something which is not eaten. We're not going to turn it into an ola. So the Gemara says, chatzos are eaten, just eaten by kohanim. So why can't you say maybe it should become a chatzos rashim? No, eladocha kachim.
Can't be a chatzos.
What I say?
I'm saying can't be a chatzos. Maybe a nashon because it's a male or female.
That's right, but right. No, it can't be a chatas of a yachid. It's an individual, right? But it could be just a general chatas, right? Maybe here's a special rule that it becomes a chatas. You know, the whole magic that makes it turn that the pasuk is indicating that it become that whatever you had kavanah for it should be that. You know, right? You could ask that. It can't be. It's a good kasha. You know, how could it be a chatas? A chatas is only a female. Could be an Ashim, right? Could be an Ashim, or it could be a Chatas of a king, it could be a Chatas of a king, or a different kind of Chas, right? So it could be that, right? It could be a Sawyer. It could be like a Sawyer. It could be a Sawyer. So that's a goat. It says Atu Chatas v'Ashim Masachim. They could be eaten also. So why do you say that can be eaten? Okay, a Pesach is eaten by anybody, so we'd rather transfer it into something, change it into something, have it become an animal that can be eaten by anybody, as opposed to Chas Hashim, which can only be eaten by male Kohanim. We don't want to turn it into Chatos Nashim, which can't be eaten by every Kohanim. Okay, that's one answer. Why it can't be? That's why we say it doesn't make sense to say it could become. It can't become an old because it's not eaten all. It can't become a chatos hashim. It only becomes a shlam. Rabbi Yosef Rabbim, so we'll have. Well, it could become other things, right? We'll talk about that. Rabbi Yosef Rabbim, dochen kachim kalam, etzel kachim kalam. Very simple. Pesach is kachim kalam. We turn it into kachim kalam. You can't turn it into a chatos or ashim or ola, which is kachim kachim. They dochen kachim kalam, etzel kachim kachim. You can't change a carbon pesach, which is kachim kalam, into something which is into chatos ashim or ola, which is kachim kachim. Master Rabbi Yitzchak Berebi Svaryo. Interesting, that's his name, Rabbi Svaryo. He asked Rabbi Yitzchak, asked this him, okay, fine. You have a rule, you don't want to change it into something which is only eaten by Kohanim or something which is kachim. Okay, fine. So turn Pesach into something which is kachim kalam. Maser. Maybe it should be maser. My nafkamina, we'll see. You're saying over here that the pasuk says, right? The pasuk says, if you have a carbon pesach brought any of the year shalol lishma, you don't say it's puzzle. Lishma is puzzle, right? Lishma is puzzle. But if you bought it shalol lishma, it becomes a shlum. So the question is, maybe it's the zebach. Maybe the zebach means it includes whatever any other carbon. It could become a chatos hashim. So that can't be because that's kachim kachim. Why can't it turn into meiser? Meiser doesn't need a sachem. And you get malchus for lo yigoel. If you redeem it, meiser, you have to bring the animal. You can't change it for something else. So maybe it becomes meiser for that. Amakra, you can't be meiser. Why? Because when it comes to meiser, it says ha'asiri yeh kodesh. The 10th one will be kodesh. Zeh meiser ve'enachem meiser. You can only have meiser if it's the 10th animal. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we had a machlokas at the beginning of Rosh Hashanah whether you have to have 10 animals from the same year. Whether the Rosh Hashanah for the year is our Rosh Hashanah tonight, or it's Rosh Hashanah. Sometimes say it's the beginning of El Tzmachlok is the beginning of El, or beginning of Tishrei. But anyway, it's got to be that could be meiser. Nothing else can be meiser. Okay. There's other kachim kalam. Let's say shechted l'shem b'chor. Ranga found the Mishagas. I took this Pesach and I shechted l'shem b'chor. Mayil chasa, again, the Lord boy nesachim. It doesn't need nesachim. And he puts in the words in the Shita puts in the words inami l'mekim l'milach v'legoel. Again, a bechor cannot be exchanged, cannot be sold, it cannot be exchanged, cannot be transferred. Inami l'slokom, you got to give it to Kohanim. So maybe that would be enough minutes. So maybe it becomes a bechor, right? Bechor nami ever be meiser. Just like meiser cannot become. You cannot make meiser out of anything other than if it's actually the 10th animal. You can't take a carbon pesach and turn it into meiser. Why? Because it's asiri kodesh. Well, there's a hekesh there's a gzeir shava between meiser and bechor. By Meiser, it says Kol sheyaver tachas hashevet, and by Bechor it says Vavarta Kol perachrechem. So it's like Gzeir Shava ever. So Bechor is like Meiser. So if you can't turn, if Pesach cannot become Meiser, it can't become Bechor either. All right. The aim of Shach l'shem Tamura. What's a Tamura? I have an animal I set aside. Animal A, it's kachim, it's from carbon. Then I say I like B, which is another animal. I like B instead of A. This is a nicer looking animal. I like the B. B is chulin. It's a regular non-sacred animal. And I would exchange it and bring it instead of A. You're not supposed to do that. But if you did it, they're both kaddish. A and B are both kaddish. But only if you do it in that manner. So the Gemara says, okay, maybe it becomes a tamura. To get malchus for it. What do we mean by that? Because he takes out the next words, inami. Because the milka, Rashi says, the milka la mishum lo yachlifenu. There's a losa say you're not supposed to do that. Now, if you did that, how did you do that? How do you make a tamura? By saying this should take the place of that. Those are just words. Now, would you get malchus for that? It's a lav shein b'maisa. So the Gemara says lav shein b'maisa generally does not get malchus, but there are three exceptions. Makalo les chaveru b'shem. If you curse somebody using God's name, if you swore falsely, even though it was only words, you get malchus for that too. And meimer and tmura. Especially, there's three exceptions based on psukim that even though the lav shein b'maisa, you get malchus for it. So maybe you should say, if I shechted the carbon pesach in the middle of the summer, l'shem tmura becomes a tmura, and I'll get malchus for it. Omer Marzuta Braid Rav Nachman says the Gemara. He takes out the words inami lamekim below yamach below yigal because it doesn't say that on tmura exactly. It's going on. They're talking about meiser and similar by bechor. Omer Marzuta Braid Rav Nachman. Omer Kodapach says v'hoyahu tmuraso. When does something become tmura? Zu tmura ve'enachet tmura. Again, when is it tmura? If I had an animal that I set aside for a carbon A, and I said B should be like A, that's how you make a tmura. There's no other way to make a tmura. Just like there's no other way to make meiser. You can't say maybe it should become meiser. No, by meiser is a rule. Meiser is only the 10th animal. Bechor is like meiser. Tmura is only if you did it in this form. You had an A animal, a hektish animal, and I said B, which is chun, should be like A. That makes tmura, nothing else tmura. They meshachte l'shem toda. Lavi Toda. Okay. Toda, remember, is a subset, is a kind of shlomim. So maybe I shall Hashem Toda, give Toda, L'mayachasa, Latino Lechem. You got to bring the 40 loaves with it. Maybe it should become a Toda. The Gemara says, Mik, immediately the Pesach Gufi Leboy Lechem. The Pesach itself doesn't require any Lechem with it, even if you wanted to bring, matzahs, even if you were to bring, not chametz stick of matzah. Now, the Pesach doesn't require any lechem with it. Umosro, and the extra part, the remainder of the Pesach that you brought in the middle of the summer, that should require lechem. So wait a minute, if you ask the case, Hihachi Hashtanami, Mikamidi, the Pesach Gufi Laboy Sachem, Pesach doesn't require Sachem, Umosro Bar Sachem. And now you're saying that if a Pesach brought Shalol Lishma in the middle of the summer becomes a Shlom, then it needs a Sachem. So why don't you ask the same kasha? Can you have something the Pesach itself doesn't require a Sachem, and you're turning it into something of Shlom which does require a Sachem? This is what we mean. It doesn't mean that itself. Mikamidi the Moser Toda Atzma Lo Boy Lechem. Let's say you brought a Toda and it got lost. All right, you brought another one in its place. Now you found the original one. The extra one, the remainder one doesn't bring loaves with it. That's the question. Mika midi the moser toda atzma lo boy lechem. The moser, the remainder itself doesn't need toda. Be the moser the asila me alma boy lechem. In other words, how do you have a moser toda? You want to say maybe the moser toda is if I bought a carbon pesach in the middle of the summer, shalol l'shma, it should become a toda. Okay, it should become a toda. So how could you say that a real moser toda, a toda where I lost the original one and I found the one and I brought it to its place and now I found the original one, which is moser toda, that doesn't bring lechem, and that toda came from the toda itself, right? It had the original kedusha of the toda. That doesn't bring lechem, and a moser toda that came via a carbon pesach should require lechem. So it doesn't make sense to say that. That's why he says if you shech l'shem toda, it could be a toda, and what you would require a lechem. That doesn't make sense. If a moser toda itself doesn't require lechem, how can the moser toda that came via carbon pesach become require lechem? That doesn't make sense. And therefore Rashi says moser toda. Take a look at Rashi above moser toda atzma. Don't hifish toda avda. Hifish acheres mim sarishona. Eina shei toda lechem. Can I be himself? Zebach toda ton lechem v'lo vlada v'lo timrasa v'lo chalifasa. And the moser that comes from somewhere else, meaning from carbon pesach, should require lechem. That doesn't make any sense at all. All right, we'll pick it up here. Tomorrow's daf is daf tes, which will start from here. Maskef Larav will start. It'll be on the podcast. We'll start from that line there. Maskef Ravada, Rav Meir Braid, Rav Hillel, about halfway down on the page where we are now. That'll be tomorrow's daf, and the second day of Rosh Hashanah's daf will be Yud. Those will both be on the podcast in Mirz Hashem shortly, and on Tzom Gedalia on Thursday. We will start from the fifth line number 5 on Daf Yud Aleph V'Lifroch, in the middle of the line there. The fifth line on Daf Yud Aleph will start in Mirz Hashem on Thursday morning at 5 a.m. Remember, throughout Seres Mei Tshuva until probably not including Erev Yom Kippur, we'll start at 5 o'clock each and every day. Shana Tova, K'tiva Chitema Tova L'Kulam.
Shana Tova, said the